Thank you. Got it.
Yep.
All right, so just a little bit about me. So I already kind of said what I'm at CRC doing. I also do clinical supervision still. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been in the field for a minute. I have a lot of experience in direct care, treatment in different kind of community settings. I'm also a veteran of the Gulf War era. I was a military police officer, staff sergeant. I also consider myself a community educator where I train organizations and teach other folks how to be engaged in these kind of conversations without undue harm or unnecessary stress if that's possible. Melaine?
So as I said, I'm a technical services librarian here at CRC. My master's degree was in library and information sciences with a focus on serving marginalized communities, specifically youth who are indeed a marginalized community of their own. I have also gone through various trainings from the Equity Literacy Institute and other bodies to become a racial equity facilitator.
Thank you. Okay, so before I even show this full PowerPoint, I just want to ask folks who heard of the Equity Academy or knows anything about it or what it might be. And don't be shy, we're all educators here. Just go ahead and put it in the chat or speak it out loud. What might it be?
Heard about it, but it seems like it's disappeared for a little bit with COVID and everything.
Right.
Because I was a new hire, 3 years ago, and I was the only, I think, hire, so we didn't do it for a while.
Okay, yeah, you're spot on. So I think me and Melaine went through right as COVID approached or changed a lot of things around. And so that's why, Todd, COVID impacted, we were doing it in person. And so COVID impacted that immediately. We finished out online, I believe, as our cohort. But the next semester, we wanted to revamp considering all the things happening with COVID and kind of just where people were. So thank you for that, Todd. Anyone else? I see.
Yeah, I went through it with Brandy Melaine, and I thought it was really, really helpful. But at the same time, I thought I'm very excited to see what improvements you guys have in mind.
Yes, we have been busy thinking. You know, us educators love to think. And so we have some great stuff to present to y'all. Jason?
Hi, sorry, don't judge. I'm in my car. I'm on my way to
Just
pick up my
don't
son.
be driving, Jason. You know the rule. We have to say that disclaimer. Don't drive.
So anyway, I took the Equity Academy with Leslie Gale back in 2005 when I was first hired.
Okay.
So it was a wonderful experience. I mean, we had, I think, 8 or 9 new hires in our cohort, and we went through a range of things. Now, granted, this was prior to COVID, prior to all the horrible events that happened with George Floyd and all that. So there wasn't quite the emphasis, I guess you could say, on self-reflection and inclusivity and whatnot that we're trying to finally put a pin in and get started now. Okay. But it definitely took us through a bunch of different activities and one big project toward the end with our colleagues, and we did have quite a diverse group. So we met, I think it was once a week or once every couple of weeks at least. And yeah, it really helped me learn about the campus and learn about some of the different, before CACs were a thing, different divisions on campus. So no, it was definitely a huge help.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Jason. Same thing for me. There was so many things I didn't even know, starting with acronyms, and just other things happening around me constantly that I was just really trying to keep my smart face on, like I knew what was happening. But the Equity Academy for sure. We had Leslie as well. So she really helped us kind of navigate some difficult topics and really brought to light some of the bigger issues happening even before they started coming up with, COVID and some other things that occurred. So thank you for that, Jason. Okay, and so let's talk about how I got started. So I had to do some digging. Forgive my clinical nature. I'm a therapist by nature, so I love to get backgrounds on things. It just helps me kind of orient and kind of know why something was started. And so the Academy started back in 2015. Catherine Mayo and Leslie Gale started it and went to some trainings and other things and started creating this. But Catherine got busy, like we all do, and so Leslie continued to pursue it and ended up leading it on her own for a couple years to come. It's been offered in the spring semesters in general. New hires usually come on in the fall, so the hope would be they start the academy in the spring. So new hires that just had that awesome party Sunday this week, Tuesday maybe. We should see some of those. Me and Elaine will meet them in the Equity Academy in the spring because me and her will be hosting it. And so with that being said, I will let her lead the next. Get it to work. Sorry. There we go.
There we go. I think we went one too far. Did we? Where are we?
On this one, Equity Academy 2015 to 2020.
Okay, yeah, so the previous purpose statement was to promote equity in the classroom by creating a collective learning environment that fosters innovative inquiry and reflection into equity-based pedagogical practices, which is a mouthful.
Right.
So previously, the content and the structure will largely be determined by the interest and needs of the participants, and then the participants will be asked to establish future discussion work groups and commit to serving as equity coaches and mentors. This was a great idea. But I will say that there has not, largely due to COVID,
Right.
but there has not been a strong support for previous participants' ability to establish such equity discussion and work groups and so on and so forth. And I say this because I tried.
Right, you did. She really did, y'all. After our cohort ended, she kept an email chain going for at least a couple months. And I
Yeah.
will admit I struggled. So I
I
didn't
mean,
get to kind of attend. I'm so sorry. But you did.
COVID, yeah, no, I mean, COVID, I mean, it threw us all for a real
Mm.
big loop, and it's still ongoing, and community has been difficult to find the time to, and mental energy and effort with what everything that we are and have been dealing with.
Right.
So that was the previous sort of purpose statement of the Equity Academy, and we've used that as a good jumping off point, I will say, for our ideas about restructuring it.
And so with that being said, I love to simplify things sometimes. Like, what do I really want people to get from this? What did I get from it? What makes sense for me when someone has or wants to engage in these kind of conversations? And it was these two simple statements here. I don't read off the PowerPoint, by the way. I'll let you all read that on your own. But the statements came from the equity statement we already have, but it also came from a reality of what people didn't have, where we heard people saying like, ooh, I would love to try that out, but I'm nervous. I don't know how to do that kind of skill, or I don't know what kind of skills I need, or I don't even know what to do with these new words like anti-racism. So we wanted to open up space to allow people to really start in a safe way exploring that. And Melaine brought the language of building the community, right? Because it doesn't really exist completely. We have pockets of it, we have committees, we have subcommittees, but we haven't really built a community where we can lean on each other as needed to get through some of these tougher parts of these conversations. One quote from a former student of mine that I love. So when the new term anti-racism came up, I started asking, well, what's the difference? You have multicultural competencies, you have cultural competence. What makes this new word so different? And she embodied it. She said cultural competence is the acknowledgement of culture, diversity, and social justice issues. Anti-racism entails action, and to act upon what we believe, acknowledge to create change. Not my quote, young student. I borrowed the quote, right? And I told her, could I borrow, or I asked her, could I borrow it? Because it summed it up nicely for me. Right? It makes sense to me to say, this is now me doing something and knowing what I'm doing to make some changes occur, even if they may be slow.
So we have retitled the Equity Academy program as building a community of equity and inclusion. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we believe a community of equity and inclusion is or could be, or what it looks like. So I'm going to bring up my notes here on my own computer because yeah. So one thing that I want to start off with framing this whole restructure as is that equity and inclusion are active journeys. Equity or inclusion, it's not a state that we can like achieve and then we stop and we're good. And it's also, we need to acknowledge that different people have different ideas, opinions, experiences about as to what creating an equitable and inclusive world looks like. And we need to acknowledge that different people also have non-compatible needs for basically access and inclusion. I'm coming from a disability studies sort of perspective here in that in the disabled community, there are people whose needs really do not match. And so one thing that works for one person or group of people is something that will be diametrically opposed, like in like what would fill their needs is like the opposite of what would fill the needs for somebody else. Like some people, for like very basic examples, some people need to have background noise while they're working so they can focus, and some people need complete silence so they can focus. And so those are two, you know, non-compatible needs to make something like equitable and accessible in terms of people being able to focus on stuff, just as an example. So like, there is no one single way that will magically create a perfect world for everybody. And that's what I mean by equity and inclusion are active journeys. It is continuous. It is and like an ethos that we need to work from rather than a state we are trying to get to. So an community of equity and inclusion and building that community, we must always be striving. And that's something that I think is really important to just like come to this idea, like a place to come from while we're thinking about this. So we need to be striving constantly, which sounds exhausting, but the work is hard. It's good work, but it's hard. Another really important thing to create or to build a community of equity and inclusion is that we, specifically we as white people, or we as those who hold any kind of privilege as compared to another group, we need to learn how to be non-defensive when we are informed by others that the privileged group that we are a part of is making life hard, or that there are you know, like certain institutional things that make life like difficult for other groups, basically. And another thing is that a community of equity and inclusion needs to be a judgment-free place. I don't want to call it a safe space, but it needs to be a judgment-free space, because the level of like self-interrogation and challenging very deeply but held beliefs that we may not even realize we have, things that are so integral to our worldview, like that level of challenge that is required for true equity work is difficult. And when you are challenged, it's hard to feel safe. So we may not ever feel safe when we are being challenged in this way, but it is important that the people that we are building a community with make a commitment to not judge other people's thoughts and beliefs that they are deliberately trying to work through, that they are trying to recognize and move beyond. And also not be judgmental of like other people's experiences and not be doubtful of other people's lived experiences. So that's what I mean by like a judgment-free space. And I think that's what I wanted to say, Brandy.
Yeah, all that. And then I want people to feel like we can start looking at what that looks like, right? And how that may be different for different folk. And to build a space where people feel like they can come in and have some tough conversations, understand what they may or may not need, and then decide what to do with it, right? As they want to do some of the equity work. Also, I think as you build a community, we have support. I come from a field in therapy where we constantly support each other, right? As colleagues, we check in often on tough cases. And so that really helps with our own mental wellness, but also helps us to have diverse ideas, right? We're all coming up with new ways to think about something or different ways of hearing different opinions and building something that is more inclusive of everyone's opinions, not just a single person. And that makes us more equitable already by just saying that, right? That we want to hear what other people want out of this conversation helps to build it, right? To say, I know what you need would be very helpful. I'm saying I have some ideas about it, but let's talk about what that could really look like over time. Yeah, any questions or comments on that before I go to the next thing?
I think James said something in the chat I wanted to call out, which is that we should define the terms equity and inclusion before we proceed to describe a community that would promote those ideas.
Mhm.
And I mean, yeah, that's fair. So equity to me means that so everyone has needs that need to be met in order for them to thrive, right? Equity would mean that those needs, in order for everyone to thrive, are being met. Everybody's needs are being met. And those needs are different for each person. And true equity means that those different needs for each person are being met in order for them to thrive in the environment that they're in.
Thank you for that, Elaine. So I put a comment there in the chat. And so Claire and some other folks have created lots of documents that are available to you. We'll go over a little bit of them at the end, but they've defined some of these things through some of the equity work and some of the stuff that Claire and other folks have done. So that's where we're pulling that from, with our own, obviously, supportive documents and kind of informational tools added to that. We'll get into that though when we talk about the topics in the academy. That'll help you kind of understand where this is coming from. Jacob, and welcome, Jacob.
Thanks.
Hey.
Yeah, thanks for all this. My question was related to James's question. I do think it's important that we define equity and we define inclusion, not just for the purposes of this discussion, but for the purposes of the work that you all are doing. Because as you say, the work that you do is to really help to foster these practices that are based upon equity, with our equity-minded approaches and equity-minded practices and so forth. In addition to defining equity, then could we also define inclusion and anti-racism as you all understand it?
No, sorry, defined. And so all those definitions you will find have been done for us. They are on the CRC's website. I could find out where and send that to everybody later, but those terms already exist. And so we're using those working terms already created as we created the academy or recreated the academy. So that is where that's coming from. Yeah, and I'll break it down a little bit more later on, but we're not redefining them here. We're defining them here. That was already done. Okay. Okay. So you all kind of already started answering some of these questions, and I'm hearing that defining them is one of the big things that we want to do. And so we will find those documents maybe during the break or maybe after the training. I'll send those out so people know where to find them on CRC's website. And those are our working definitions currently. So as we try, for those that can answer this question and do have a working term in their mind that they use to decide what's equitable and what's inclusive, what are some things you might want to see in a space that was trying to offer this kind of support? Anyone? Any ideas? I heard definitions for short would be the one big thing people want to have. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next thing. So the goal of the what was called the Equity Academy and the restatement of it, we have CRC's equity statement here. And we pulled things from CRC's website and got things from other places to show that these things have been stated, but we have not really been taught how to do them, right? They've been stated in different ways, they've been defined in different ways, but we have not completely learned how to do them. So the hope is that anyone that goes through the Equity Academy, specific to new hires, will get a chance to understand the terms, understand the goal, and learn what to do and how to implement some equitable practices, classrooms, with colleagues, etc. Melaine, anything to add about the purpose statement course description?
So I just in case anybody is listening to this later who is like visually impaired, I will just read this. So our purpose statement or the description of our course is that we will explore cultural competence as the foundational knowledge needed to build skills and strategies that are anti-racist. Spend time developing skills to challenge isms, which we will talk about what that means later, within our safe space as a cohort, and extending these practices to colleagues and students. We will explore cultural identity formulation to define anti-racist and anti-racism practices. And we will review CRC's policies and statements of equity and cultural diversity through guest speakers and community allies. Participants will also be allowed some anonymous submissions just to sort of strike a balance between sort of the gathering of data that we need to review our program and also maintaining people's right to privacy and to have a space, again, a judgment-free space where, you know, we're not going to keep data on individual people and then how well they are. We just want people to have the ability to explore and self-interrogate freely without fear of judgment. So you're muted, Brandy.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, thank you, Elaine. And we wanted people to have a chance to be free in their speech. We didn't want to make it super course heavy work. Like we wanted people to have time to talk and think about things. And so again, these are new hires. So they're coming into a system of folk and departments they may or may not know well. So we want them to be curious, and we're hoping that that will also happen as the program builds, meaning the academy builds, but also as people come in and give us feedback. And that's why we're also here today to see what some of the needs are around this conversation.
Brandy, you're muted again.
What
And
is
I was
happening?
muted too. I don't know.
Oh no, I must have reclicked it. Oh, I'll keep clicking. Sorry, y'all, about that. So what I said was challenging isms is part of what we view as anti-racism work, but also equity work. Right? We naturally do it by being non-discriminatory and some other things. And so oftentimes when we start challenging some of these isms, new questions come up, new things come up, and new ways we talk about them come up over time. Like ableism has come up in different ways in accessibility, right? I see it with documents and how I create different documents for students, but also how things are more readily available, even within Google Drive. There's new accessibility tools in there that help you kind of better prepare documents. And so I think as we continue to challenge isms, we'll move into a way that we know how to be in the work of equity and not just kind of know what is supposed to happen. We'll be doing some things that are more effective. Anything to add there, Melaine? You're muted too. I'm just gonna leave myself unmuted now. I'm worried I'm gonna mute myself.
We're
again.
having issues with our mute buttons today.
Yeah.
So the isms, I also just want to point out that this is not an exhaustive list because humans love to sort things, and the ways in which we can sort people into little categories is endless. So this is very much not an exhaustive list of isms.
Thank you for that. And again, all the while we're doing this work, we just want to make sure we're aware, right? And things will evolve and change. And that's the beauty of what we're trying to create, is that we will update and modify things as the world changes, which will give us a chance to be more in tune with folks and the needs happening for our colleagues, but as well as for students. So one thing that came to me as I was trying to even navigate some of these things in my own mind was back in the military. I was in the Air Force. I was a police officer in the Air Force for 6 years. I left the Air Force and became a therapist. But when I was in the Air Force as a cop and someone that carried a firearm or several, we had some things called rules of engagement. Now I looked this up and the rules have kind of changed over time, but I thought of that in the way of how do I deal with people I don't know and things I don't know much about, but have to maintain some level of peace. So I came up with this thing of engaging rules and how we can talk with each other and have some agreements about what should happen in the space. How do we really move through conversations and bring in different emotions, opinions, experiences, and really work through challenging topics with some clear agreements on how we will do that together. Of course, we're not enemies, right? Most of us here have some reasonable investment in change, right? No matter what that change may be. And so the hope is that we create these engaging rules and that people start to use those as more of a foundational skill to know how to have some tough conversations and what to do when you don't know what to say, that there's some basic agreements people have as a community, remember the community we're building, so they can engage in a way that makes sense to them. Anything to add there, Malone?
You said it.
All right. Okay, I'll let you take this away, the Canvas content modules for the.
Yeah, so we are, as always, open to suggestions
Yes.
for content, both from the community at large, if you see a need that is going unaddressed, or from the particular people who are going through the, I don't want to call it a course, but going through the program next spring. Back in the original purpose statement of the, as it was, Equity Academy, there was a note in there about how the structure and content will be responsive to the needs and interests and desires of the people in the program. But this is what we have come up with so far. There will be, kind of a welcome and orientation, so the creating how to create a inclusive learning environment. We will cover anti-racism and cultural competence and the difference between those two things, and also how they, interact and support each other. Brandy is going to lead us on cultural identity formulation, sort of. Deep personal work. And then we will discuss creating inclusivity. I will, with help from others, I will also do again, coming from disability studies is an interest of mine. So I will cover that and how to, again, create an inclusive environment for people with disabilities. And then we will also cover the queer community and the queer experience at large. And implicit bias. I don't know how many of you were involved with the previous one book, but we will be drawing from that research. Not that book in particular, because it is sadly a little outdated, but it was groundbreaking at the time and the research has continued. So we will be covering implicit bias and how to uncover that in your own, approach to the world, and how to become more anti-racist in the actions that we take and the way that we interact with each other. There will be reflection. There will be reflections and self-interrogation throughout all of this, but we will sort of have a dedicated space for that. And then we will lead a little bit about how to care for oneself as we are doing this work, because as I said, it is hard work. It is good work, but it is hard work. And we can't create lasting change if we burn ourselves out. And then there will be the final project presentation, which ideally is going to be a potluck and also a sharing of food. Food is my love language. So sharing, and there's so much deep cultural meaning in food. And so there will be a final project presentation, and that will also include a potluck.
Yeah, thank you. And the hope with the content modules and kind of what we came up with was taking some of the things Leslie had already created and looking at what things we wanted to add and kind of update. And then also what would be topics people would be curious about and be willing to kind of explore with us as offerings, right? Everything offered, in my opinion, education is just that. It's a gift. You can take it or not, right? You can look at it, you cannot. And so hopefully people will see some of these as opportunity to think about something as opposed, you don't know what to do yet maybe, but they can just think about something different. And we're hoping to open up people in that way. So this, I don't know why the goofiness sometimes in Google Slides. So there's some books out there. A lot of the books that I have read over time come from different authors. The book we're using for the Academy is going to be that first one. And I'll talk about that a little bit later after a quick break. Another book is Nonviolent Communication. It is a good book. It's a deep read, I will admit, but it gives an idea how to not do the us versus them, hero versus villain, good versus bad, right versus wrong. When we get stuck in that kind of dichotomous thinking or kind of black and white or kind of only right or wrong, we lose opportunities for growth. We lose opportunities to be inclusive. And so that's what that book is. So I'm still reading it. I will be honest. I'll finish at the end of this semester, but that book will highlight some other skills needed to engage in healthy conversations and dialogue about these topics. Another book I recommend is the Book of Forgiving by Desmond Tutu. And that book is a great tool if you're trying to understand what happens to people historically when something tragic happens, historical enslavement of folk, other tragedies, other traumas, and kind of how people can move through it. So he offers some really good tips in there on forgiving, but also forgiving yourself if needed. Another book that I did read, I believe, is How to Be, no, I didn't read this one yet, nope, How to Be Anti-Racist, but I did hear him speak. And so in that book, he gives more definitions. He gives some ideas about what that could mean. He also delineates between anti-racism and anti-racist. And so if you have not read that book and you're interested, I encourage you to read it if you have time. Another book that I found very helpful for me coming into the field is The Black Academic's Guide to Winning Tenure Without Losing Your Soul. That book was vital for me to navigate some things I hadn't really prepared for as I came into academia, but it really helped me understand some key components to equity work and what it means to take care of myself as I do that kind of work. Another book that Elaine has recommended, Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Devin Price. I will let her take that away for those.
Yeah, so this book was a paradigm shift for me in particular. This ties back to the conversation about how we cannot create lasting change by burning ourselves out. The culture of overwork, particularly in the United States, has done an incredible amount of damage to our abilities to sustainably be activists. This book does a deep dive into how the culture of overwork and the concept of laziness, or like people believing that rest is something that is to be earned or something that is bad. There's a deep dive into how much damage that does. And the other book I wanted to recommend is particularly Daring Greatly by Brené Brown, because that is the one that dives into shame and vulnerability and how our fear of experiencing shame and our fear of essentially like being wrong about stuff makes it almost impossible for us to like change our minds about things. And I recommend all of Brené Brown's work. Daring Greatly probably is the most succinct way of getting into the concepts about the kind of self-interrogation work that needs to be done in order to become anti-racist. At least that is my opinion. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Okay, so another book that I'm also still reading, I'm halfway through, and we're going to shout out my colleague in here, Colby, who we went to a training some years ago and we got this book for free. And I just started reading it years later. But this book is really helpful in my opinion. It was written by a clinician, which for sure I support, but also it gives language I have never heard of. It gives me an idea of what trauma has done to everybody, so Black and brown bodies, and also non-Black and brown bodies, right? And the realities of a history of trauma in our makeup of society we have here currently. And so he really starts to go through things you could do with body work in safe ways for those that want that. And he also talks a lot about things that kind of led us to this point and how do we begin to mend it, right? We all want this to mend and heal so we can move on to the next thing, whatever that may be for the society. But in general, this is a great book to finish up with after you read the other books, in my opinion. Any questions or comments about this book? All right. So before we take our brief break, let me stop sharing. I'm going to put a link in the chat. The link in the chat is the PDF. You can review it and read it now. You can read it later if you choose. We will have a discussion. And so let me put the link in the chat first. This is from the book, What If? And so the link is there. We're going to take a 2:24. Look at that. We're going to take a brief break, a 5-minute break. If you have time to review it, please do. Otherwise, we'll just have a discussion that we can have already. So 5 minutes, do what you need. We'll see you all back at 2:30 on the dot, according to my watch. All right, everyone, welcome back, welcome back. And yes, Jacob, I will find those documents and get them sent out to everyone. I'll probably send them to you and James, and then get with Andrea and figure out how to send it to everybody that came to the training today. So thank you for that reminder. Okay, so hopefully you all had a brief break, enough to kind of settle your mind. I put the PDF link in there, but because of time, I'm gonna just go straight to a little discussion, because we don't want to run over time, but we also want to give some time for more questions if there's more questions. So give me one moment to pull back up the PowerPoint. Okay. So I'm thinking for this one, oh, someone have a question. So what I'm thinking for this conversation, and it is okay if you have questions about this. So we're going to go to breakout rooms to answer these questions here. We're going to separate the rooms by choice. So meaning those that may identify as BIPOC, or anything related to being a person of color is welcome to stay with me. Those that may not identify that way can go to Mullane, but you can also go to either one if you chose to. It's going to be similar conversations. And so what I want to talk about and what I want to talk about in these rooms is this little question here. And so I often think about the environments, right? And so the PDF I sent you is from the book. It talks about the right environment. So the way he writes this book, he talks in more of a narrative language, and he talks in a way that he tells a story, and then the story has a point. So if that's not your thing, then that book may not be the best fit for you. But there's a question he asks in there as we try to create something, right? How do we make the right environment? So I have these 3 questions posed for us. And we're going to start there with our conversation about how to create the kind of right environment or what that could look like. So I'm going to copy these questions. I'm going to put them into the chat. I'm going to open up the breakout room. And then you're going to go in there. We're going to spend about 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes having a discussion. And then after that discussion, we're going to come back and share out. Then with time remaining, we will try to answer any other questions. Go ahead, Jason. I see your hand.
Okay, I just wanted to be completely clear. When you say first learning environment, are you referring to the very first that I can recall, or more secondary education, or?
It could be either or. So maybe you have more fond memories of your first learning environment, maybe K through 12, but maybe somebody else has a fonder memory when they were in college or in high school or some other kind of schooling. It's whatever you choose that fits for you.
Okay, all right, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the questions are there in the chat. I would encourage copying and pasting them. If you're not familiar with Zoom, they will go away when I put you in the breakout room. And so with that being said, the breakout room, if I can find that here. So we're going to all go to a room. And so room 1 is going to be mine. And room 2 is going to be me. So you choose what fits for you. Rooms are now open. I'll wait till everybody starts to clear out, then I'll go into the breakout room. We're going to say about 10 to 15 minutes is the goal.
I'm gonna head over to my room.
Yep.
Follow me.
Oh, yep. That's doing the same thing. See you all in a moment.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I think there's 6 of us, is that right?
It's like 5,
2, 5, okay.
4.
4 now? Oh. There's some of us in here.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I had to take a quick snapshot of the questions. So has anybody had a chance to think about their first learning experience, their first classroom, I guess? I can go if everybody's okay with that. I don't know. I mean, I can remember back to my very first like kindergarten, but I mean, I think that might be a little too elementary because all I worried about was knocking blocks over and drinking milk and eating cookies or something. So I don't remember if that's going to be really helpful in this. But for me, one of the most memorable instructors I've had in my classes was an English class in high school, just because that was the first time that I don't write things anymore, and I'm an anatomy physiology instructor, so I'm not in English. But she really enjoyed the stuff I wrote, and she was just a really nice instructor. After I graduated, she was awarded teacher of the year in our school districts. I mean, she had a really fun way of teaching the class. So, but I mean, thinking back on it, all that I can say about that class, since we're talking about equity and inclusivity, was that there was one individual that was not white. He was Hispanic. So in terms of that, I mean, it was a very isolated type of environment. So we read your typical literature at that time, Tom Sawyer and some Shakespearean stuff. So it wasn't a very diverse type of presentation of what we consider, I guess, an inclusive or equitable environment these days. So, it was, for me, very comfortable because, again, surrounded by my peers for the most part. I mean, even, Jason Perez was the individual that was the one non-white individual, and we were really good friends, but none of us felt out of place, at least that anybody talked about. Obviously, in this day and age, there could have been people feeling, insecure about any number of things, but she made it a very welcoming experience.
I don't really even know what to say about who were my classmates, or you think of the first learning environment you entered. I don't really consider it like learning environment I entered by my choice or like because I was, you got dropped off at school. I'm not really sure. I also never thought about the racial makeup of the folks that were around me. I did think often about different family differences, right? Between what it was like for me and my family and what it was like for other kids who had different family setups. So that was something that I think, I grew up in the Bay Area and was really integrated. And that wasn't something to be noticed. It wasn't something that was to be made much of. But people who did have, less affluence was something that did really strike me and kind of got me a little bit more into the idea that they don't have the type of support that I had. How did the teachers and instructors and mentors support us in the environment? I don't know. They were just trying to teach us. They were just trying to get through curriculum. I don't think that they were really, I never felt like there were teachers who were too into developing people. They were more into getting through curriculum and having learning outcomes sort of be made manifest rather than, there are perspectives that people have and very supportive of how children grow in their own way. I didn't really have that. It was all pretty much, here's this stuff, you gotta learn this stuff and memorize these things. It wasn't about who are you becoming. It wasn't about how do we foster some elements that we think are good about you already, and how do we mitigate those that are challenging for you interacting with your peers and your instructors in your environment. It wasn't really about that. It was just rigid expectations for behavior and for study. So, thinking about that, I didn't enjoy schooling until I got to college. I didn't enjoy, I didn't fall in love with learning until I got to college. And so that kind of says that there was an environment that wasn't really fostering, and save, again, like Jason said, great instructors. I had one instructor he's a pediatrician now. He taught anatomy and physiology in high school. and he went out of his way to engage the class and engage individuals. So I'm not saying there weren't individuals who didn't do that. It just wasn't my experience. And it was really that lone instructor who fostered a sense that going to college and proceeding would be really a good idea.
And so for me, I was, my first learning environment was in Nebraska, and in a small town where I think there was one other Hispanic family, and those were my family, my cousins and my aunts and uncles, and there was one Black family. That never really ever played a part in, I should say, race as I understood it, as I understand it now. Looking back on my experiences, never played a part at all in my environment that I realized, at least. And so for me, it was just a regular learning environment. I never really liked school, never really liked the teachers, never really wanted them to interact with me. I loved learning the whole time. I loved learning the different things that we were being taught, but I like James, I didn't enjoy being in class and like engaging in the content of the course of my classes until college.
I came on the tail end of that, Jacob. Thank you for sharing. Thank you, James, too, for sharing your story too about your experience at school. Yeah, so we got about 45 seconds and everybody will come back flooding into the room. We'll talk about what we shared in our rooms with each other. Coming to Akron, you can go ahead. Eight seconds and they shall come zooming back in, no pun intended. Okay, there we are. All right, I will let Melaine go first, and then I will briefly summarize what my room talked about, or someone from the room can also kind of chime in. So go ahead and go, Melaine.
Yeah, so we didn't get a lot of chance to talk about the time. It was not enough. But what we talked about is, for those of us who did get a chance to speak, we spoke about how I think the most important takeaway was that having a teacher who sees and supports you, an educator who sees and supports you, makes the most difference between being engaged or successful as a student and being sad and miserable and hating it. Is our big takeaway.
Yeah, I think that came up in our room too. Does anyone want to comment on what came up in the room we were in talking about this? And I'll go back. Cool.
Yeah, I don't mind sharing.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, it was definitely too little time, but it was good. My kindergarten teacher, I didn't know at the time, I don't think any of us knew, she had terminal cancer. And the summer after kindergarten, she opened her home to us all. We just thought it was a summer camp. And I just remember her sitting there with the biggest smile on her face, like there was nothing we could do to take that smile off of her face. And then she passed away shortly after the end of the summer. But for some reason, I think about the word inclusion when I, relive that experience. But definitely a very positive experience.
Thank you, Michael. Similar, what came up in the room for most of us was the person's action, right? Frank shared some of his story, Christina shared some of hers, and it was what the person did, right? No matter what grade we talked about, something they did made us feel like their learning environment was also a caring environment, right? We wouldn't be invisible, we'd be seen, we'd be heard. And that was a big deal for some of us, especially as younger kids. But I think as adults, we would want the same thing, right? We would want to come into a room and feel like we're seen, we're heard, or respected, that we have a chance to kind of engage with each other and kind of feel welcomed, right? That no one doesn't feel like they don't belong, best we can, right? Any other thoughts or reflections on those questions? Anyone want to share anything else about that reflection?
I'll just say one thing.
Of course, Jacob.
From my own experiences, as a younger kid, I liked learning. I didn't have hands-on teachers. I didn't have teachers I believed to be supportive of me. I liked the content and I was interested in what they were saying. And then as I got older, I really didn't like my teachers, like in high school. They mistreated me.
I'm sorry to hear that, Jacob.
It's my life.
I get it.
I've learned to live with it. But I still liked learning. But for that reason, I decided college wasn't for me, and I joined the Marine Corps. When I realized that wasn't for me, yeah, right. When I realized that wasn't for me, I came back to college, and I realized that I guess I sort of liked the hands-off approach of most community college professors there at CRC, at least, and then I transferred to Berkeley, and things were similar. That most of them were hands-off and sort of just let me do what I was going to do, but would still engage me and things like that. So I don't know. My experience has been a bit different from others, I think, in that regard.
Yeah, I can relate, Jacob. Same thing. I was in high school, said college is not my thing. These folks don't like me per se. I'm never going to get far in this. So I went to the Air Force. Did fine in the Air Force. Same decision. I'm going to try this again. Like maybe I'm older now. And then I had a better run in the Air Force, honestly, than I did in a four-year college. It was kinder to us in the military as active duty people, professors were, that is. But again, it's great to hear that though, right? That you found what you needed and came back to education. And for some of our students, that's what they're also doing, right? They're coming back to environments where they may not have felt like they belonged before. And so as we learn to create that in our classrooms, we have to mirror that with each other. How do we create similar experiences with each other when we engage in these conversations and make it a thing that we can say, hey, you know what? When I come to that space, I feel that I'm welcome in the space and then I can talk about various things. And so I'm thankful for everyone that gave their feedback. So as we wrap up, and I promise I will send those documents out no later than 5 p.m. this evening, as soon as I find them all. There's a slew of them that Sarah had given us. And so what's the next step? So what are we doing now? Forgive the delay in my screen. So the hope is that we can have another focus group sometime in the fall where we can give more people opinions. So maybe after those that wanted to review those documents get a chance to do that, we'll come back to the focus group and kind of give us some more feedback on things you think and kind of what things could be incorporated in those or how those documents could be used. Some of you may need to think about becoming a trainer at some point. Me and Melaine have already decided that we want to make sure we do a respectful changing of the guards over time, that other people get to come in and give their opinions about these topics and kind of lead other modules, other content, give you things that are different. And so we will need people to do that. And so we have that focus group, probably October. We'll talk about that, and those interested can let us know. We also need alternates. Every now and then we may be sick or something may be happening. So I would love people to volunteer to be an alternate, to do a guest lecture, to come in and run a module. It just depends, but we want to have a conversation with you all. And then we want to be able to support each other and decide what that can look like. And it's a conversation we get to have for those that come to those meetings. We have not set them up yet formally, but we will. And we're hoping to also offer some trainings throughout the next couple of academic years that can support some professional development happening regarding this conversation. So again, I want to thank you all for your attention. And I want to end on self-care, so I'm going to not harp on it for too long. I want to talk about self-care in 5 parts. So mental or psychological, that should be a slash, physical, spiritual, emotional, and relationships. Oftentimes people think of self-care as kind of like innate bodily functions, right? I have to go to the bathroom, I have to eat. Yeah, that's kind of self-care, but you have to do a little bit deeper self-care if you're engaged in this work. So you have to be aware of what things you need to cope through various things. And it could be things that aren't traditional, meaning that you may want to go to the gym and do boxing, right? Whatever it may be for you, we want to start sharing what those things are as a group so we can all know what is kind of healing and self-care look like when we're engaged in this kind of work. Melaine, any comments to add as we close?
Nothing in particular.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. So we got 10 minutes. Any other questions or things that we can answer? Todd, go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, just to clarify, so spring you are planning on doing some sort of, it's not the Equity Academy, what are you calling it now? Academy Inclusion, Community Core.
Building a community of equity and inclusion.
We need a shorter title.
I know.
You are planning that in the spring.
Community of equity and inclusion. So it's CEI.
Okay,
Yes.
CEI.
We love our acronyms.
Yes, for our lover of acronyms, we were ready. CEI is what we can refer to it as.
All right, CEI. So
Yeah.
planning on that in the spring, and how many hours a week are you planning on expecting that, and how many participants are you allowing into that course?
So that is not decided by us, it's new hires. And so that's Claire and some other people that decide what new hires come in. So it's always been offered as a full course for the semester, meaning that you meet every Friday for about 4 hours throughout the semester with a couple breaks because of the holidays. And we had done it in person. So we're looking at offering it in person as well, depending on how things are happening in the world. And then we asked permission from Claire and other folks. Could it possibly be open up to other people if they wanted to join? We didn't get a complete answer yet, but pretty much it will start with new hires and they'll decide after that what may be
okay,
available or offered.
So I'm going to throw it out there. So people like myself who haven't had that opportunity yet, we've been working with the district full time for a few years.
You can
We
advocate
might
to
have
go.
the opportunity.
Yep,
Okay.
you sure can. I asked her for 5 years. So anyone that's been hired in the past 5 years that didn't get a chance to go and may want to, they will be open to it. I have no concrete answers there. So they're open to it. So I say if you want to do it, advocate for yourself with your dean. Okay. All right. I saw your hand. Oh, go ahead.
I have a question. I'm a new hire, so
Hi,
I have to do
welcome.
it. But
So you have to do it. You're gonna
yeah,
like it.
it's part of the. No, I mean, yeah, that's not a good word. Anyway,
Okay.
is it part of the flex or is it completely separate? Like,
It's separate. So you often get release times. You'll get a 0.2 FTE release to do the academy. And so if you're a teaching faculty, they lessen your load by 0.2. So your dean will clarify what that could look like for you if you're teaching faculty. So it's part of your regular work schedule, except Fridays, most of us are kind of off. So, but Fridays would be where the academy was. Fridays from, I think, 9 to 12 or something like that we worked out.
Yeah, I think might as well.
so is it completely different from flex or college
Yeah.
service? Okay.
Yep.
I believe it does fulfill professional development time requirements, though, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
mean the flex is different?
So there's so much terminology.
Yeah. It's
I know.
confusing
I
for
think
me.
my memory is that it doesn't count towards flex or professional development because you're being paid for the time.
Right. It's really,
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's that 0.2.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
got it.
We can get further clarification and
Later.
if you are going to be joining us in the spring because you're a new hire, things will be better explained to you as we have a better handle on them.
Okay.
November,
So-
we had hoped to convene and kind of go over with new hires, what it would look like
Okay.
for them in the training. I didn't
So
forget
it
about you
doesn't-
because I thought I saw your hand.
So it doesn't start in the fall. It's in the
No, it doesn't.
No,
start
it's
until
spring.
Spring.
Okay.
Mhm.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Thank
you.
you. And pronounce
Um,
your name for me, please. Can you pronounce your name for me?
Pronounce. Hanku.
Hanku. Thank
Hanku.
you. Mhm.
Nice
All
to
right.
meet you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you too. Welcome to the team. James, I saw your hand and I saw it go down. Do you have a question?
You answered it. I was unclear on whether it was going to be something that people were able to come together as a group. I just really thought that was so important. When I saw, I never had the opportunity. I was hired a long time ago.
Right.
But in the last couple of years, I had one of my faculty members in my department go through, and she invited me to her final presentation.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just was really struck by how important that was for new hires to have a group of people to go through something together, to more than just the building the community of equity and inclusion. It's building a cohort of faculty that, the average person spends 25 years here.
Right.
in CRC when you're hired. So you really, it's something that's really important to stress, that getting together or creating opportunities for faculty to learn that mutual support within this environment. I thank you both, Melaine and Brandy, for doing this. I really appreciate your hard work in facilitating this opportunity for those folks. And you know, if it comes, I doubt that there will be much motivation for them to have all faculty go through 8.2
Oh, I
release time.
think
So
there could be some.
I don't anticipate getting to do that, but I really do, you know, keep advertising it, because I would definitely kind of like those final presentations. That was really, it was such a wonderful way to connect.
Potluck. We should go for the potluck. People
Not
can
just,
be here.
not just
Yeah.
for the physical food, but you know, food for thought too.
Right. Thank you, Jen. Oh, go ahead, Melaine, then I'll comment on the structure.
Yeah, if you are interested in going through this program, I would really encourage you to talk with administration about your interest, because we would love to offer it for anybody who wants to do it.
Right.
But if you could apply a little bit of friendly pressure
Would be nice.
on the people in
In
charge
large
of making
groups,
that decision.
Long conversations and long emails.
Yep.
Yeah. But what we offered them, so we said the same thing. I was like, it's not completely helpful to have this one time a year thing for folks. And so they said we can offer some other formats, some similar to like the OEI we've done, the OER, where you do like a Canvas course and you can kind of pop in as professional development. We played with that. So it'll be kind of condensed modules. It couldn't be the whole thing, but it would be condensed modules, and people will get guidance on where to start. So you don't start in the middle, you start kind of in the beginning, and you can kind of pick how you go through it. And they kind of like that idea, so people can have their PD done and not have to take off like release time or things like that. So we threw it out there, and we'll see what they say. But they'll decide, I think, before the academy, I hope, but CEI, excuse me, or at least by the end of this year, they'll decide, can we do that or not? And then people will know. We'll kind of promote it, and we'll talk more about it at the focus group to get people's opinion and get that heard. We'll invite Claire so she can hear too.
But you know what, Brandy, I like the Canvas idea too, so that you can do it independently, but I also like this coming together and sharing the narrative. Like when we have the breakout room, because it puts more of a personal connection to,
and that's what we got to start.
Yes.
We got to start there, right? We got to start with those things, because these are really tough things. And some of the best mentors I've had in this subject, in this topic, have always broken bread with me in some way. You know, we've gathered together, talked together, we know each other, and we can hear, you know, hard things and talk about hard things. And it makes it a little bit easier when you know caring is still present, right? We all care about each other. So I want to thank you all for coming. I hope to see some of you all in another email about a focus group. I'm going to send out those links, the documents that Claire and some other folks have created about this topic and where we pull some of the terms from. So again, I'll get that out before 5 p.m. this afternoon. Otherwise, when we check out, and Kobe probably knows about checkout, we're going to take one word with us from this day, from this moment. This brief little hour, 15-ish we just had together. You had to kind of think it up in one word. What would it be? And just plop that in the chat as you leave, and then give us a wave, and we'll see you soon. Ooh, I like that, hope. Well, you stole my name. I was like typing welcoming as you took that. Inspiring, optimism, belonging, yeah, positive, caring, loving it. So yeah, let's keep this going. And so if this space felt like something different for you, we hope that's the point. It didn't feel like a formal meeting, we hope. It felt like something where you came together. Personal experiences, kindness, yes. Let's keep building that. That's what we're talking about. That's what we want to create here, okay? So you all, thank you. Have a great day. I'll see some of you all tomorrow at Convocation. Otherwise, I'll see you around the campus. Bye-bye. Bye, Frank.
I don't know if Jason's still there.
Jason, do you have audio? I know Jason was.
It might be.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason.
You're welcome. And I'm only driving for like a minute and a half. So
Okay, you're safe now. You're safe now. We hope, Jason.
yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
completely safe. And I didn't realize that there was actually a disclaimer about that. So I learned something else about.
Yeah, we told students.
Don't
and
drive in
graduates,
Zoom.
Yeah,
Well, that,
I either have the
yes.
whole
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
They will tell you no. They'll say, please don't do that. Yeah, they are concerned
yeah.
about us driving and doing other activities again. But thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Hopefully you enjoyed
No.
the space.
Appreciate it. Enjoy your first week, and maybe I'll see y'all tomorrow.
Yeah, we'll be busy. Yes, y'all tomorrow. Yes, we'll be out
All right,
there.
it's gonna be hot too. I'm gonna bring
It will
my
be.
water and
Oh, I'm
whatnot.
gonna bring
So
an umbrella. I'm bringing an umbrella.
yeah, there you go.
I will be that
There
person
you go.
this time. Yeah.
We'll call it maybe a parasol. I don't know. So it's not quite
Yeah.
an
Right,
umbrella.
I'll
I
twirl
don't
a
know.
little bit for
Yeah.
You'll see me.
I
so it's gonna
have
be-
a genuine lace parasol. I'll bring it.
Really? I have a white one. I'm
There
gonna
you
bring
go.
my white one, Melaine. I'm
All
wearing a
right.
white one. You bring your lace one. Jason, what are you bringing? What color?
I mean, I've got a big, giant black and green golf umbrella. So
Let's
maybe I
look
can
for
get
each
three
other.
or four
Let's
people.
wave at each other when we see our camera. We'll be like, hey, I
That
see you
might
under
not be
there.
a bad idea. Here we go. Yeah, that's our call sign for tomorrow, right?
Look,
So-
I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
"Hey, Jason."
Yeah.
I like it.
I might bring it and see if people mind. I'll sit in the back so I don't
If
block
they won't
people's
mind, I
view.
doubt they'll be glad to see us. They'll try to join our shade, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, everybody wants to see Dr. Bush, so it's like, put that umbrella
Right.
down. So,
Right. Right.
so anyway, thank you, ladies. I appreciate
You're
it.
welcome.
You know,
Thank you,
it's-
Jason. Bye-bye.
all right, bye now.
Do you want to stay on a debrief for a few minutes, Melaine, or do you have another meeting?
No, I don't have another meeting.
Okay.
I'm here if you want to debrief.
Yeah, I do. I do.
Okay.
I want to hear what your thoughts were. How did it go? Did we thought we were gonna do?
Yeah, definitely not enough time to do that whole activity. I don't know how much.
know. We knew it though, right? You said it. You was like,
Yeah.
Really, that's a lot. And so I was like, yo, we got to cut that short. They're not gonna be able to do the whole thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm good turnout.
Let me stop the recording.
Oh, that's still going.
Yeah.